So, welcome to KRTD Media News. This is the Friday show on Sunday evening. I am Joe Evans, and I'm here today with Joe Firestone. Our normal host, Shane Coughlin, is busy this evening. So, thank you for joining us. Joe, say hi to the crowd.
Hi, folks. How are you doing tonight? Now, we are doing fine.
Very good. So, Shane, sorry about that. Reef, go ahead and lead us off with the first story here. Excellent. So our first big story tonight has to do with Frito-Lay work-offs, particularly with regards to the strikes and the suicide shifts and recent events. Now, I understand we have some video that's associated with this.
So yeah, we have video at the end, which is special and fun, but the story itself is hundreds of Frito-Lay workers in Topeka, Kansas are in their third week of a strike, citing so-called suicide shifts and poor working conditions at the manufacturing and distribution plant at a time when the company's net revenue growth has exceeded all of its targets. NPR was unable to reach union officials, but local 218 Chief Steward Paul Clem on Monday described how it worked in a podcast interview. He said workers who clock in for a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift are often forced to work 4 hours of overtime. Then the company will turn you right around and bring you in at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you only have 8 hours off to get home, shower, see your family, get some sleep, and get back to work. Food is helpful. But let's continue. Right, many of the 850 workers at the facility say they work 84 hours a week with no days off. Workers are nominally supposed to work 8-hour shifts, but workers are often forced to add on an extra 4 hours before or after their shifts. Workers call these extended shifts suicide shifts. Some workers haven't had a single day off in 5 months, including Saturdays and Sundays. Sherry Renfo, who was interviewed by the Topeka Journal, right, says this. So, you are shocked that your employees voted to strike for the first time at this plant. I'm shocked you are so out of touch with your employees. You didn't see this coming. Right. Another worker was interviewed saying, I can tell you that many people have had heart attacks in the heat at Frito-Lay since I've been here. One guy died a few years ago, and the company had people pick him up, move him over to the side, and put another person in his spot without shutting the business down for 2 seconds. So fun work environment. But yeah, this is one of many strikes that are going on. But what's your guys' take on this so far?
You know, we were looking at a situation where the management of the union was in bed with the corporations, in bed with the companies. And we're seeing a replay of that right now again, where we have no worker representation in the union leadership. You know, and I think that's problematic. But as far as Joe, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Okay, from my point of view, the first thing I thought of when I encountered the story was, isn't there something called the Fair Labor Standards, Wages and Hours Act, something that was passed had way back during the New Deal that prohibits this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you would
So,
think so.
yeah, so why don't we have enforcement of this going on? I don't know why people would have to strike. I don't know why the union hasn't made a phone call to the federal government to get somebody in there. And this is clearly illegal as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean it's probably one of those things where they're skirting around the rule just enough, right? There's probably some weird bylaw in place that.
Right, isn't that the story?
Yeah, absolutely.
How can they skirt around that law?
Yeah.
Also, something that isn't really made clear, okay, in the article is
Go ahead.
how can they cause people to work more than 40 hours a week without having to pay a time and a half?
Right.
How can they have them work more than 48 hours a week without having to go into double time?
Right.
And if they're paying them time and a half, okay, in double time, how can the company afford to do that?
Yeah.
And why are they doing that instead of hiring new employees?
On top of already pretty bad working conditions from what I've read. You know.
Right. So there are a lot of thoughts that pop into my head about this, but then the thought of all thoughts is, why do we live in a country that seems to have the same kind of business orientations that people had back in the 1930s and 1920s? During the 1950s and 60s, no company in the country would treat their people this way. It would have been totally unacceptable. It would have been a PR disaster. It would have doomed the company. What is wrong with our culture now? What has happened over this length of time, these various years? It's got to be the triumph of neoliberalism. That's what's happened. And the selling out of our government representatives.
Well,
we know that many of them are bought.
And this is a real interesting thought, Joe. Reason why is because this goes back to our education system, the way that we acculturalize, our next generation to the way things are currently operating in the U.S. Currently, right now, we have the right, the political right, the neoliberals saying they're going in and they're indoctrinating our kids in our schools. And then we step back and we take a look at a situation like this and we go, no, we've indoctrinated our children into believing that this is an acceptable work standard.
Yeah.
So ultimately, who is it that's actually doing the indoctrination here? Have we successfully indoctrinated our children into believing that 80-hour work weeks is an acceptable norm?
I certainly hope not.
Right? I hope not. But that's what, we take a look at what's going on with COVID right now in regards to the working standards across the United States. People got their sabbatical. They got their year-long to say, I don't have to work. I have my unemployment that will carry me through, that will pay my bills. There are things that are coming through that assist me in living. I have come to understand that I am worth more than my 80-hour work week. And there are literally people that are walking away from jobs that they consider to be demeaning right now, forcing them to increase wages. You see McDonald's workers in minimum wage states, $7.25. Here in the state of Idaho, our minimum wage is $7.25. Employers cannot hire anyone for less than $14, $15 an hour right now.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Joe. I'm very glad to hear that. It's about time. It's about
it is about time.
Turned.
We no longer need a minimum wage because our base pay for an employer to hire someone is twice what our minimum wage is right now. Now, I'm not going to go out and advocate getting away with minimum wage, but the point is right now the minimum wage we have set is pointless. That's where we are with the economy right now, as far as people recognizing that in order to have a livable wage, I can't accept anything less than this standard. And right now, the standard happens to be $15 an hour. And that's even for teenage workers right now. You know,
and so we're into a period of business adjustment.
oh, yes, it's a market correction. It's absolutely huge.
Just have to turn around, okay, and have to become acculturated to the idea that they do have to pay more or people will not come into work.
Yes, and that includes paying more at Frito-Lay.
Yes.
With this story, they've interviewed a bunch of them, right? And people were saying they haven't had raises in years, right? And
yeah,
you know, I think even at high level positions, they're only getting paid $20 an hour, which is not enough to live off of most places right now. You know, I was reading other stories where, you know, $15 dollars an hour wouldn't even buy you average rent in most of the country, right?
No.
So you know, we're talking about, you know, and the one thing in this story that their one bone that they're trying to throw people over this strike is you know, in their latest contract offer, Frito-Lay has said it would raise wages by just 4% over the next 2 years and put a cap on it at 60 hours a week. Right? So
that's a union fail in my book. You know,
yeah,
their union representatives should definitely be working harder than that.
Right. And
you know,
and
the union shouldn't have to go to the federal government to say, hey, they're breaking the rules. The union should be able to say 40 with time and a half till 48, and you put a cap at 56.
I mean, at this point, I'm ready for unions to.
After 48, it's double time.
Yeah,
well, I'm ready for unions.
56, and you know, everybody gets to go home, and the minimum wage on the floor is $20 an hour.
Yeah, I'm ready for unions to stop going to the federal government for breaking rules and start going back to the mob to break kneecaps, because at least that worked and put Jimmy Hoffa in the ground somewhere. You know, like
go back to the Jimmy Hoffa model of big union.
Yeah, just strong arm everyone and get what you want. You know, so I mean, I don't know. This is one of those things. You know, on top of let me pull this video of who has been working at the Frito-Lay people and what they think about this situation.
Okay,
Reef, let's see
that video.
Streets near the Frito-Lay plant today kind of looking like this. KSNT News reporter Dan Garrett explains why people are gathering in hopes that their voices are heard.
Man, it just, I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm mad. They got us working 84 hours a week in this thing. All right? Do it look like my shoes can hold my fat ass for 84 hours? That's what I'm saying. And the thing about it, they got the little mascots on the thing, like Chester Cheeto. I'm tired, I'm heard.
I'll back it up a little bit.
Man, it just, I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm mad. They got us working 84 hours a week in this thing. All right? Do it look like my shoes can hold my fat ass for 84 hours? That's what I'm saying. And the thing about it, they got the little mascots on the thing, like Chester Cheeto. He ain't got to worry about this type of shit. He just get on his motorcycle and he gone. I can't afford a motorcycle with the pay they give me up in here. I got child support coming out my check. I got the food stamps about to get cut off. And what's a little handsome man with the Steve Harvey mustache on the Pringles can? The Pringles man, and the little boy with the dog on the Cracker Jacks box. You ain't never seen them frowning, did you? Now the only thing Frito can do is kiss my ass, cause now I'm about to go talk about Frito-Lays. I'm about to go be lazy. You hear me? I'm about to go lay the down. Because I ain't doing this no more. I'm about to go see if they hiding down there at Lowe's. And y'all don't really give a damn about my story. Y'all can get the camera on my face. Y'all just want to get y'all story. That's what y'all want to do.
I mean, power to this guy, because you know, like, how do you? It's just craziness, and this craziness has gone. You know, people are tired of this. You know, that they continually work crazy hours at no pay, you know. So
A lot of this, I think, has to do with the fact that the federal government has stepped back with regards to an awful lot of their labor regulations and a lot of their fair labor market issues and turned it over to the states. And the states in certain industries have literally gone in and repealed a lot of the state legislation or a lot of the federal legislation and said, you know what, we'll allow certain industries to, work 60 hours without overtime. We will allow certain industries. And one of the other things, I'm not sure, which state is this in, Reef?
Topeka, Kansas, I think.
Kansas.
Yeah.
Kansas, yeah.
Middle of the country. One of those flyover states.
Right?
Yes, it's
Middle
been
of the
a conservative state.
Yeah.
It is a conservative
Dominated
state.
by the Republicans for a very long time. And under
One of the-
Brownback, who was the governor a few years ago, they just went crazy conservative when it came to simply removing their safety nets
Oh, yeah.
and just trying to cut back on all government spending. Of course, it was a total failure for the economy of the state at that time, but I still don't think they've changed much out there.
Yeah.
Well, it's like one of the things we're seeing more and more commonly in a lot of these Republican states, and I'll even go with Democrats because California has been particularly bad about this as well, is a lot of these industries have started resorting to prison labor pools.
Yeah.
They go in and trustees from prisoners get out on work release programs to go work in these companies, these organizations.
Let me tell you about a little place called Angola, right? So my family hails from Louisiana.
What state?
Louisiana, right? And Angola used to be and still is an actual plantation. It is a plantation that is now a private prison. And we'll get into how they tried to drown people in Katrina and all that fun stuff by locking doors and throwing away keys. But what they do now and what they've been doing is that your work release is you get to go pick what, guys? What do you get to go pick? Cotton. You get to go pick cotton and work the cows. And then when the cotton's all dried up, you get to go work the soybean and you get to go work the tobacco. It's a plantation.
How much do they get paid? How much they get paid?
I mean, I don't know. Whatever commissary, how many ramen packs do you think commissary is going to let you have? Like,
well,
like it.
Take into consideration California right now. They pay their prison firefighters $2 an hour.
Yeah. Yep.
That's California. That's a blue state.
A blue
That's
state.
a blue state. $2 an hour.
And they keep them in past the time they're due to serve if they happen to be short of the firefighters.
Right.
That's what our current vice president of the United States did when she was the attorney general in California. She just loved that. Well, I'm just going to keep these guys in for a longer time. That's all. Well, I mean, we got to fight these fires. We can't afford to pay them anymore. I forget what they were paying them out there. It might have been $1 an hour.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure it was $2 an hour in that time out in California.
So, I mean, this literally could be a situation. Now, Dan Negrete here is, listed as a chief union steward. But this literally could be a situation where Frito-Lay has looked at the situation and gone, you know what? Union, you're going to accept the standards we give, because if you don't, we're going to replace your workers with prison labor.
Yeah.
Because the state's willing to lease that prison labor for, $15 an hour.
Well, plenty of people are wanting a job right now, right?
There are.
Scabs are definitely going to be a thing with this, and it leads me to our next little bit of this particular story about this. This is not just a singular instance. I mean, yes, wildcat strikes are happening across the country, but let's see if it'll let me go to the
may
next
have seen several people on the
slide
streets
here. But I've been finding this going around. This is octoberstrike.com, which I will put that in the chat here, right? Everyone should go check this out. They have a Discord. They have, a link tree and stuff. I definitely would think people should go be a part of this, but, they're trying to have a general strike October 15th nationwide, right? And these are their demands, right? Paid paternal leave, a $20 minimum wage, a 25% corporate tax without loopholes, right? And stricter environmental regulations, and of course, healthcare for all. So I think this is brought together by a group of people called the Raven Corps. They're all young activists. But definitely go give them some support. But yeah, what do you guys think of this?
Why did they stop at a corporate tax of 25%?
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. You know, I think it's probably a good starting point. I'll take that. You know.
I won't.
Yeah.
I want to raise the corporate tax,
right,
to where it used to be during the Reagan administration, when he first began to cut corporate taxes.
Right. What was it at then? Do you remember?
I don't recall exactly, but I believe it was somewhere in the 30s, or perhaps even as high as 45%.
And that was going into Clinton years, where we had that economic big boom of money.
By the end of the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
Well, the Reagan administration wasn't the first one to cut the taxes, because if you go back to the Eisenhower administration, his war tax, and everything that was going on with relation to that was profits. Anything over, $1 million or 5 million, I guess it was at the time. Anything over 5 million was taxed at, like 90%. Now, what this caused was an awful lot of reinvestment into the company. So rather than being taxed on the money by profit, they reinvested it so that they'd spent the money.
Right.
And this continued to see reinvestment in the country on a regular basis. Then along comes, Vietnam, Korea. You're looking at Kennedy's tax cut. While he started investing in the race to the moon, you start looking at some of the other things, and you just slowly see the reinvestment in America disappear as we continue to see the tax rates on corporations and the rich drop.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Exactly what happened.
The problem was,
but the taxes was still pretty appreciable, even after the early Reagan tax cuts.
Yes.
Yeah.
The tax rates for business was still pretty high. Okay, now, as the Reagan administration wore on, there were even attempts to raise taxes by Reagan. But then when Bush came in, he lowered the corporate tax to 28%. Okay, that's how it first got to 28%. Then when Clinton came into office, he raised it again for a while. Okay, but then when Bush 43 came in, of course, he began to cut taxes again. And since then, during the last 20 years, they've really continuously gone down, until but during the Trump period, what do we find them at now? At 20% or something like that?
Something ridiculously low. But you saw an awful lot of vested interest from Trump and his cronies in seeing that corporate tax drop. But that's one of those things that we start getting into the issue of, are we interested in going back to localized governance and more of an Austrian style economy? Or are we going to maintain the fiat currency the way the government's currently handling it, and using MMT and Keynesian theory in order to maintain and bolster our economy? We've seen what happened with both Trump and Biden. Currently, the Federal Reserve is just printing money. Money printer go brrr. We're currently dealing with 5% inflation rates right now, even while incomes are going up only 3%. This 4% raise. Yeah, Joe.
To be clear about that, though, when the Federal Reserve prints money, okay, it is creating money so that it can swap the dollars for the assets, okay, that are owned by banks and insurance companies, okay, and other entities. And the reason why it's doing that, supposedly, is to make sure there is a sufficient amount of money, cash money, reserves essentially, liquidity inside of the
Ed?
economy,
Gotcha.
inside the private sector. But in terms of the accounting practices, it is swapping the money for an equal amount of assets that are owned by the private companies. Now, the reason why this is important is because they may be printing money or creating money, but from an accounting point of view, they're not creating any net financial assets. There's nothing actually going to people in the same way as deficit spending creates net financial assets for people.
No, it's
So
going
with all this
into
other money, with all this cash money sloshing around, but what's going on is the private businesses are using the liquid money to spend to drive up asset prices. So we're looking at a very great amount of asset inflation in the economy, while at the same time, there are still many poor people and many people who are lacking jobs, okay, at this point. Unemployment rates are still pretty high. And of course, we have the situation that we remarked on before, that in many places, the wages are still very, very low, and people don't have enough to live on. So we have kind of a paradoxical economy that is going wild in certain sectors of the economy and essentially going down in certain other sectors of the economy at the same time. It's a rather a dangerous kind of situation.
We're printing money for the military, and we're printing money for quantitative easing. No one else gets printed money, right? If we want healthcare, they don't want to print it for that. They don't want to print it for a job program. You know, all of that apparently we can't afford, and how are you going to pay for it and whatever, right? But we've been printing money and giving it to people who already have giant wallets under their bed, right? And
one of those people that we've been printing money for happens to be BlackRock, and they've been using it to consolidate land and housing across the United States.
Absolutely.
Yes,
and we can give it to Bezos.
Land and housing
they're bidding up assets. Okay, they're bidding up home assets,
real estate, capital.
Right, real estate, so that middle class people who want to buy homes,
right,
but no longer have a place in the bidding situation.
No, they start getting into gentrification and all that fun stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
You know, I think
gentrification pushes social capital out of communities.
Bubble in housing.
I think this story and the story that happened over the weekend of the marches for the Medicare for All, right? I think that the big thing on this story is that elected electoral politics is probably not going to be the answer right now. You know, the answer for your solutions are putting it to them, and in any way you can do that. You know,
whether you look at a socialist solution, whether you look at a libertarian solution, whether or not you look at, a decentralized solution where you're getting things out of the federal government's hands, we are long past the point where electoral politics is going to solve the problem. It's going to take direct action. It's going to take strikes. It's going to take people coming up with new solutions to old problems, because we've continued to see these same problems recycle themselves. We need to start being more innovative than we've been in the past. We need to come up with a process and procedure.
Yes, we certainly do. And we have to play lots of different kinds of things. And you're right, just continuing with the old electoralism is not going to work. However, electoralism still has to be a part of the process, because we cannot change the laws without passing legislation. There is no other way without actually overturning the whole system completely. Okay, so we are stuck eventually with getting back to the Congress, getting back to the president, and passing the laws that seem to us appropriate at the time. And there's no getting away from that. But on the other hand, we need to change the whole background of politics with activism.
Yes.
with such
Yep.
things as general strikes, various kinds of marches, okay, and protests, but the use of social media, use of all the various tools we can think up, okay, and we can imagine to enrich the social background of politics so that politics itself has to change.
Yep. I
Well,
mean, leaving.
that's where we get into the situation of how do we go about facilitating that change. Reason why is because a lot of people, particularly as you start looking in the anarchist zone with regards to the way the state acts, they're beginning to think that there is no choice but direct action that, waters the tree of patriot, or, that particular dangerous route that ultimately overturns the government as it is violently.
Yes.
The fall of New Rome, or whether or not we can successfully transition back to, a reasonable democracy that is, return it from its current oligarchical state.
Right.
But neither one is going to be effective without direct action, without having people who are able to step forward and say, this is wrong, so that other people who understand that it is wrong have someone to rally to.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's one of the great things about the Raven Corps here. They're actually stepping up. They're seeing an awful lot of support among other organizations, BLM, DSA, others that are understanding that the system is broken and it's no longer representative of even the majority of Americans. Not just not representative of them, but the majority of us.
Yep.
Time
to get out there for sure.
For a long time.
Yep.
It's well past time to have this general strike.
I mean, I've been general striking since what, 16? Just don't go get a job. That's close enough.
That's one way to do it, Reef.
Right. I want to start on our next story, which is
absolutely.
More of this.
Let's move on to the next one.
Which is more of this, right to repair, which the FTC votes unanimously to enforce everyone's right to repair their goods. But I pulled this video from Louis Rossman out of New York, who is a MacBook and Apple repair guy who's been fighting right to repair now for quite a bit. And he's going to explain what right to repair is.
This is a $2,000 MacBook Pro laptop. This is the motherboard that goes into the machine. It's like the brain, and this is the most expensive part in the computer. This is $1,500. Sometimes people will have problems with their MacBook Pro where it no longer turns on or it no longer charges the battery when they plug in the charger, and when that happens, very often the only thing that's wrong with the device is that this little charging chip over here has gone bad. Now in the past, when something like this happened, you could just go to a website like Mouser or DigiKey and you could buy yourself a replacement chip for as low as $12.18. But now what manufacturers do is they tell the company that makes that chip, like Renesas or Intersil, don't sell it to anybody else but us, don't make it available to the public. What that means is that the customer no longer has the option to come to somebody like me to replace this $12 chip for them. They have to go back to the manufacturer and pay $1,500 to replace the entire board. This is happening across every product line in every industry, and it is destroying the craft of repair unless we do something about it. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, I hope you learned something.
Well, yeah, pretty good introduction to what it is. I know you have some knowledge on this this issue, Evans. So if you want to give your thoughts.
So the right to repair problem has been infecting just about every industry, and it's even been hitting agriculture particularly hard. Reason why is because a lot of these tractors, a lot of the combines, these small-time farmers have been able to buy and afford over the years as they've slowly improved on their ability to generate revenue from their farms. They bought equipment that now they can't go in and personally repair. So you find random mechanics that have gone in and found Russian hacks in order to break into Chinese chips so that they can repair their own, farm equipment on site, rather than taking it back to the cat manufacturer, John Deere, or one of these other organizations, and paying out the yin yang to have something bulk replaced, because, they're not allowed to just replace the small chunk that's broken. So we continue to see agriculture expenses go up because of this. The control that's gone on, the fact, and you start looking at, I mean, see, why are we using Russian hacks to break into Chinese equipment so we can do farming on American soil? There's just something innately broken in this process.
Yeah, and this has infected every bit of the American consumer product industry, because you look at your car, you look at your cell phone, your TV, everything, your blender. It's all to where the ice cream machine at McDonald's, right? They have set it up to where
you were talking about that. There's only one person, one certified
repair guy,
McDonald's ice cream repair.
Right. Cost him, $5,000 to come out and look at your ice cream machine, and that your franchised Walmart owner can't afford to do that every week, and they've made it to where every error code they can't look up to fix. They've made it to where, parts are proprietary things, and you're not allowed to buy aftermarket versions, or, and this is going on with everything. I know I do a lot of cell phone repair stuff. I can't get into your phone without putting an object in the microwave, heating it up for a particular amount of time, letting it sit on the front screen of your phone for at least 30 to 40 seconds, right? And then I can hopefully peel the glue off from the back of your screen so that I can replace just the screen, not anything else, the thing that breaks on most phones, first and foremost, because all of you just drop it without a case or screen protector, right? So the thing that's supposed to, I then have to have a UV glue machine to be able to glue it back into your phone, right? And then you can go about your day. Now, if I can't find a screen replacement that allows me to avoid any of that, or, I definitely can't undo the sandwich wedge of the digitizer and the glass screen. I would love to be able to just replace the top layer of glass, but that's way too hard, apparently, for me to be able to do, right? Louis Rossman, I know, has, you see him with that giant electron, that microscope he's got back there to do, microscopic desoldering, which, like, what Apple repair place has that? I'll tell you, zero.
They don't.
They point that what they do have is the new iPhone shelf, and they point you right over there and make you pay, how much is a MacBook, he said, $2,500 or whatever. And that board itself, even if you're going to replace the board, it's $1,500. And again, this is happening to everything. Luckily, we have some good news on this issue. Let me get to that. So during an open commission meeting Wednesday, the Federal Trade Commission voted unanimously to enforce laws around the right to repair, thereby ensuring that U.S. consumers will be able to repair their own electronic and automotive devices. The vote, which was led by new FTC chair and known tech critic Lena Khan, also comes 12 days after President Joe Biden signed a broad executive order aimed at promoting competition in the U.S. economy. The order addressed a wide range of industries, from banks to airlines to tech companies, but a portion of it encouraged the FTC, which operates as an independent agency, to create new rules that would prevent companies from restricting repair options for consumers. I don't see where the parliamentarians signed off on this, so I don't know if this can actually go through, because we all know Kamala has complete control over those decisions right now. So,
well, but the thing is, this actually goes back to the 1980s with a planned obsolescence.
Yes.
We were creating a situation where things literally started to fail on a given cycle, so that people would go in and replace them. Our phones, we see, Samsung comes out with a new update every 6 months. iPhones come out with a new update every 6 months. The newest, the greatest, all of this planned obsolescence is just built into the system.
Yep.
What happened to the days of Nokia, where a Nokia phone, it's brick, it's going to last 10 years for you, assuming you can keep updating, the hardware with its ability to interface with whatever microwaves are being used for the different radio waves.
Yeah.
But the planned obsolescence has been one of the most damaging things to our environment, You know, not even taking into consideration the economic impact, but the environmental impact. You know, the fact that you can't replace a small chip, they're just going to throw away the entire motherboard and replace it with a brand new one.
Yep.
You know, the amount of rare earth metals that go into that initial motherboard in the first place, you know, the rare earth metals that go into your phone, you know, just for the screen itself, every one of these things that needs to be replaced, all of it's going into a landfill. None of it's being recycled. None of it's being reused. None of it's being repurposed. Boom, it just goes into a landfill and you go and mine more of it. You know,
Yep.
Your computer's dead, throw it away, go mine a new one.
This is a lot of the problem with, go ahead, Joe.
First, the solution is for people to go to the landfills and start to mine land.
Oh, that's already happening. There's already urban mining is what they call it, right? Where you're taking apart old stuff and removing all the silicate waste and leaving yourself chemically with gold, silver, lithium, all that stuff. But, you know, lithium right now is what I'm worried about, because, you know, we're already starting, you know, fiascos in South America over it. We're already, you know,
so we can maintain our supplies.
Right. Yep. And that's going to be the new thing.
Peru.
Yep.
There's imperialism going on in both of those places because we got to have their lithium.
Now, my questions about this specific thing is, I don't know what all the FTC has power to do, right?
But I'll tell you one thing, though. The FTC has nothing to do with the parliamentarian.
Yes, I know. I do know that. But
well, you know, it's
we don't have to worry about the parliamentarian.
FTC can insert its ruling, and then the parliamentarians come along right behind them and overrule them. And they will say, okay, that new rule that you put into the way that you conduct business, yeah, we're going to negate that. That is no longer your policy. You know, you're going to have to rewrite the policy and see whether or not we approve it again.
That's not the parliamentarian who does that. It's the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court would come in, and but they would have to be, it would have to be brought up.
The Federalist Society.
Yeah. So what?
6 people from Federalist Society are in control of the Supreme Court from one organization.
Yeah. My fears are similar to Jessa Jones, a repair expert who runs a business in upstate New York called iPad Rehab, who claims to have fixed over 4,000 iPhones, urged the FTC to take the enforcement of the existing regulations seriously. So there's already regulations that are supposedly, you know, supposed to use this, mainly the Magnus Moss Warranty Act, right? Which is an anti-tying statement. There's still rampant disregard of the FTC rules, Jones said during the public comments portion of the meeting they had. Consumers and manufacturers alike still believe that you can void a warranty simply by opening a device. They do this by making sure that there's, if screws see oxygen, right, their color changes, right? There's stickers that you can't peel off without a Teflon-coated plastic razor blade. Right. You know, not that companies like iFixit and plenty of other companies right now, their sole purposes is to give people the ability to get past those restrictions. But I mean, this is the thing that's happening as far as with all of these devices, tractors and whatever. It's we're apparently too dumb to be able to fix our own goods, right? And it leads people to the, do you actually own the thing you're buying, right?
Of course, is the central question.
Right.
This. How did this get started in the first place, considering that we're supposed to own what we buy?
Well, and Wozniak, who we all know for Steve Jobs stealing all his, you know, ability and putting it into Macintosh, came out recently and talked about, you know, televisions, right? Where one of the only reasons he was able to do what he did was because they used to put the wiring diagrams of the television inside the television so that you could, you know, open up the back, look at the diagram, and put in your new fuses and your new ray tubes, and, you know, you should be good to go again. And he was able to look at that and plug in his disk drive, right? And you start getting into the Macintosh 1, Macintosh 2, or whatever, right? So his whole thing was like this is what's causing the lack of innovation, right? Is that we're not allowed to repair the things we have so that we know how they work, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's just an interesting thing that's happening. Again, I don't know what this ruling will mean. I don't know if it allows for more suits, and it might be they're trying to set up a ruling for the Supreme Court, right? To come in and say stuff on things, right? But who's going to sue Apple, and who's going to, who has the money to do all that stuff against these things? But I know Louis Rossman has been working real hard on right to repair and gets in the courts and is a key witness on most of these right to repair bills. And, power to him. But,
well,
anyway,
again, it comes back to one of the points you brought, is the ability for innovation. Literally, we have told kids all across the United States that they cannot go in and reverse engineer, the devices that they live with.
Yep.
This is their access to the world. This is their access to other nations, other countries, other ideas, and the ability that they keep that, they may be shut out because their parents can't afford to go sink another $1,500 into their system. Yep. When they probably have the ability to get onto their brother's system, Google, the capability, say, oh, that's all I need to do is pop that screw out, grab this piece, pop, boom,
Yep.
And literally you got a 12-year-old engineering wonder who's, on his way to building a quantum computer now, rather than being shunted off to some back alley place because he never figured out how to use a screwdriver.
Well, this is part and parcel with new age design and stuff, and lack of modularity. And I have a gaming PC here, which allows me to stream what we're doing now, right? I probably have paid I don't know, multiple thousand into that machine, right? But
with each upgrade,
with each upgrade, but it allows me to, if one part fails, I don't have to buy an entire new computer. I can purchase the single part that's failed, and most of them are under warranty, so I send it back to the company, I get a new one back, right? But is your cell phone able to do that? No. Is your laptop able to do that? No. Now, there are companies, I know Google was one that was their moonshot project, was looking into, I think it was called phone blocks, where, it was a modular phone device to where you could pull out, battery, camera, CPU, all pull it off a basic cell phone frame with a new screen, and everything could come off. You could put everything back on in varying different configurations, right? And I know iFixit has started working with laptop manufacturers to make more modular laptops that are easily repairable. But having said that, most people aren't going to go look up those products. They're going to go right to Best Buy and buy exactly what the guy tells them to get. Yeah. So, but anyway, I think we've just
that's literally some of the things right now. It's, if I want to go in and replace my $1,700 laptop, by now that exact same quality I can go into Best Buy and pick up for about $600.
Well, and there's a reason why homeless people have cell phones and not a home, because you need them. You need access.
You do.
Them. Yeah.
You literally do. That phone is more important than a street address to exist in our current techno environment.
Absolutely.
That phone is your connection to family. It is your connection to services. It is your connection to social services.
Getting a job.
You can even use
all those
that
things
phone to Zoom with your therapist.
Yep. Every job application is now online. You're gonna have to put it. I can't just walk in and put an application into McDonald's. I've got to go through their service or go to the library or do something to get on there to do that. But I think we've milked this story pretty dry.
We have milked it pretty good.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, this one was mine, and this was relationship to Japan's state. Japan came out about 2 weeks ago with a statement that said they were 100% in support of Taiwan in maintaining the defense of Taiwan in the South Pacific. Reason why is because their argument, whatever happens to Taiwan happens to Japan, just as if it's kind of a domino effect that's going to continue on. Now, in rebuttal to that, the Chinese Communist Party aired a video in which it warned Japan of a nuclear response and full-scale war if the island nation interferes with China's handling of Taiwan. Now, the video, which appeared on channel approved by the CCP, singles out Japan as the one exception to China's policy to not use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear powers. We will use nuclear bombs first, the video said. We will use nuclear bombs continuously. We will do this until Japan declares unconditional surrender.
Oh, so this is really historical context. Very important here. If some other nation had said something like this concerning Taiwan, I don't know whether the Chinese would have responded in this way. But the historical context is, okay, that when the Japanese first started to play around with the Chinese, one of the things they did was conquer Taiwan, which became Formosa, okay, if you recall. And that was kind of the lead-in to the Japanese invasion, okay, of China and to their domination of China for some period, okay, of time, and all the atrocities that accompanied that historically. So Chinese nationalism, a lot of Chinese nationalism, okay, was about getting out from under the thumb of the Japanese, okay, as well as the Western colonial powers. So now for Japan to somehow come out and say, we are going to defend Taiwan, which the Chinese consider to be part of China, that must have really hit a raw spot with the Chinese Communist Party. And that's probably why they responded in this way. Okay, it was not only because they were trying to send a message to the United States, okay, and they were trying to send a message to Japan in just a cold and calculating way, but they were probably also trying to say to Japan, oh no, you're not doing this to us again. There is no way. That is our territory. And don't you think for a minute that you're going to come in there again. So anyway, that's my perspective on why the CCP probably reacted in that way, in such a forceful way. But of course, the background of it also is to warn the United States as well. But whether there is a larger conflict coming up between the US and China, when China, as it inevitably will, tries to take back control, okay, of Taiwan. I don't know whether this is a real signal that they're going to try to speed this up now or not. And I think we have to be very careful how we respond to this move by the CCP. Very careful indeed, because I think without actually going to nuclear war, I'm not sure how much capability we have to counter the Chinese there if they make a serious move against Taiwan.
Yeah, and this goes back to the whole issue, a longstanding history between China and Japan, and their issues goes back to prior to World War II. Yeah. You know, Japan, when they were at the height of their industrialization, was an empire, and literally they colonized China, they colonized the Koreas, you know, they colonized most of that area that now falls under the Chinese protection, you know, whether it was down in Vietnam or any of those other locations. And the unfortunate thing is during the era, the role that the emperors were able to exert over the colonized countries was extreme. You know, one of the current comparisons that we're looking at is here in the US and in Canada are the boarding schools, the residential schools. Okay, during the occupation of Japan in both China and the Koreas, they did that exact same thing. They created residential schools, went in and took kids away from their parents and stuck them in these schools in order to turn them into employees for the Japanese industry.
Yes.
They went through a complete deculturalization process. And the children of those residential schools, you know, they may be grandmothers now, grandfathers now,
Probably great-grandfathers.
great-grandfathers. But those stories have gone through the generations of what Japan did to the Chinese people when China was a colony of Japan.
Right, and what they did in particular to the women, of course.
Yeah. You know, and you take that, one of the things that we talk about, you know, from a military perspective and our occupation in Taiwan, or not Taiwan, but in Japan, you know, the places where we have the Marines, you know, following World War II, there was an awful lot of sex work that was involved in association with the occupying forces. You know, the Japanese made available comfort women for the occupiers. Okay. Why was it so easy for the Japanese to do this? Because that's what the Japanese expected of every country they occupied.
Right, because they were doing the same thing when they were the.
They were doing the exact same thing. So they honestly, you know, well, we did it to them. We might as well, you know, we understand it's going to happen to us. So let's just go ahead and accommodate. Okay, now the thing is most of those cultures, when the Japanese went in and did that, that wasn't an expectation for the victors. You know, the victors weren't supposed to come in and just devalue the lives of those people that, you know, they came into command of. So again, this, from a cultural perspective, you know, Chairman Z, you know, he probably had, you know, within 2 generations, someone who was a survivor of one of the Japanese residential schools. You know, so there is a historical context that we can't just blow off here.
Yes.
And, you know, I know we want to, because this is what's happening in our time. You know, not Chairman Z's time, not Chairman Z's grandma's time. You know, this, what's happening now in relationship to what's going on with Taiwan and Japan. But the thing is, China's got a long history. It's got a long culture. It's got a long memory.
Yes,
and
a very long memory, and it was very insensitive, actually, for the Japanese to make this move. They should have left it to the United States and just kept moving. Historically, and but culturally, Taiwan is Chinese, and the Chinese, okay, have always known that, and it's tied in with their ideas that eventually all that was China has to go back to China, and that will be the end of the colonial period. In other words, they don't even consider that they're fully at the end of the colonial period, okay, in China. And they won't feel that that nightmare has ended until they've taken back the whole of China. That's what Hong Kong was and is really about. And they don't feel differently about Taiwan, okay, than they did Hong Kong. They consider Taiwan a part, okay, of China, okay, that it's rightfully theirs. And the Communist Party regime will not believe that it has fulfilled its mission until it gets back Taiwan. And they'll probably tie in their feelings about this to the idea of the mandate of heaven. the Chinese emperors held power supposedly because they had the mandate of heaven. And when bad things, something
After a
similar to
fashion.
that, okay, but what it had to do with is when bad things happened in China, okay, sooner or later it was considered that the emperor, the people who were ruling China, had lost the mandate of heaven and had no more legitimacy to rule. And it was during those times when one of the dynasties in China was ended and new dynasties came in, okay, and took power. That was a political change process in China,
Right.
historically speaking. And the cultural memory of that is something relevant to the Chinese Communist Party today. If the Chinese Communist Party is not able to fulfill the mission it has from a nationalist point of view, it will be viewed as having lost the mandate of heaven among the Chinese. And that's when it can start having some civil problems inside of China. And I think that's another reason why they're so sensitive about wanting to take back Taiwan.
Yeah, and the other thing is Taiwan is still largely considered to be the government of China in exile.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so literally this is a challenge of two dynasties.
Yes.
You have the communist dynasty that has taken possession of mainland, and you have the Chinese Republic of Taiwan. You know, these are the two dynasties that now represent the Chinese people in total. And ultimately, one of them has to win so that the mandate can be fulfilled.
Right. The Chinese Communist Party can't possibly tolerate the continued independence of Taiwan. But on the positive side, they will be very patient about how many years it may take to take that back. So I don't think we need to get into a fight with them over that now. There are various things we can do, you know, to delay things and postpone the time of crisis. But I have to say, I don't know what the people of Taiwan will do as the years go by and they see themselves maybe as getting more and more divorced from China, you know, and is just wanting a national state of their own. I don't know what kind of sentiment there is for that in Taiwan, but if it's strong sentiment, it's going to come into conflict with the ideas of the mainland Chinese that they can never be an independent nation.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to square that circle.
I don't either. It's also weird because you see stuff like what is that? John Cena has to like apologize in Chinese to China because he mentioned Taiwan somewhere, right? And I know Blizzard's fired. Not only Blizzard video game company had a couple of things recently where they're also in a whole court trial about sexual harassment, you know, workplace environment things, which looked pretty bad for them. But they had stuff where gamers at a like esports event had put up on their webcams, you know, free Taiwan. And this is two separate instances, I think. And then another time where it was the Hong Kong protest. Not only did Blizzard never work with those gamers again, right? But they also fired the producers, or not the producers, but the presenters of the program, because they had, like, you know, talked about it on air, right? Yeah. So, you know, we're definitely, China's a big influence right now here in this country, and you know,
this goes clear back to Nixon, though. You know, Nixon was the first president to give mainland China, you know, favored nation trade status. He was also the U.S. president that facilitated the transition of the senior partners on the Security Council from Taiwan
yes,
to mainland China. So this corporate proprietary arrangement that we've developed here in the United States with China that allows our corporations to continue to seek labor in industry, in transfer of labor and industrial labor from the US over to China in order to maximize corporate profits here in the US, has continued to be a problem ever since Nixon. The free trade agreements were just, icing on the cake, when it came to Reagan and the Bushes. Nixon had already set in motion, the rise of communist China as a state capitalist organization, because that's effectively what they are now. They're no longer communist. They're running on a state capitalism, they're running on a profiteering, and they are currently working on creating capital based off US investments in Chinese labor. So this problem goes clear back to Nixon, and it's just continued to escalate. And honestly, I don't know. There will be a point in the future where the US will not be able to prevent, mainland China from being able to go in and forcefully take Taiwan, even though that is an extremely bad idea for mainland China, regardless, because the divergence in culture between Taiwan and mainland China has grown so distinct over the last, 50 years now. I don't know that there's a reconciliation point that can happen with a forceful takeover.
Yeah, I don't know about that either. But I do have the feeling that there are still considerable contacts. I'm talking about population contacts. People in Taiwan often go to visit family, and relatives, and especially at the time, of the Chinese New Year, there literally are millions of people who are going back to China to see family, at that time, and then they come back to Taiwan. So I'm not completely certain about the degree of cultural divergence there is, because there is this kind of family-to-family contact that has gone on actually all through the years since the opening, of China to the West.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because Hong Kong, 100 years of British occupation before being returned to mainland China, is one thing, whereas Taiwan, the culture in exile, and the relationship with Japan as a Japanese colony during a brief period of time, you may not see the same degree of contention with a arrangement between Taiwan and mainland China conforming to one government than you currently see with the issues in Hong Kong because of the breadth of time, 100 years versus 50 years. Then again, the Taiwanese expect a republic, not the party.
Yeah, they do. And it has been close to 75 years now, actually, because the communists took over mainland China. When was it? 49 or 1950? I think it was 49. They took over. So they've been
71 years now,
since then. So it's close to 75 years now.
Steve in the chat asks, would the United States defend Taiwan to the point of nuclear war?
I don't know. I suspect that now we probably still would, if the Chinese were to start a nuclear war. But I don't think for a moment that they would start one, because I think that our nuclear power is still too strong. Now, whether they would start conventional war, that's a different story. But that's a matter of the context of the relative military power in terms of the navies of the two countries. I'm not certain how far the Chinese Navy, is built up okay, and whether it can deploy forces that are the equal of the forces that we can put out into the China Sea. Okay, I just am not up sufficiently on the military aspects of that.
Right.
And that is one of those things that we do have to consider is, the U.S. force projection capability allows us to put a significant presence in, our 11 carrier fleets right now. If we were to amass them in the South Pacific, represent more firepower than probably the entirety of, China and what the CCP can manage and muster. However, that represents a certain commitment on the part of the U.S. that I'm not quite sure we're prepared to do, especially with a favored trade status nation.
Right.
Which may be one of the reasons why we've stayed off as much as we have. But we're also in a precarious position because China and Russia have both been emphasizing their military doctrines and technology on the defensive posture. Basically, how do they counter our force projection? How close can we actually get our forces to their country before they can in turn, retaliate in such a way that we can't, prevent the retaliation from doing significant damage to the bulk of our forces in a given area? We hear rumors about the supersonic missiles that are coming out of Russia at the time, supersonic missiles coming out of China, the ability to take out a U.S. aircraft carrier, that's within, 50 to 100 miles of either of these shores. So coastal surface to water artillery capability has continued to improve on them, allowing them to defend their positions against our force projection capability.
Yes.
So it's like, how willing are we to test, those new technologies that they've been developing specifically to counter our capabilities?
Right. Then we also have to consider whether what kind of reaction would come from our side if they were successful in knocking out a couple carriers.
Right.
In other words, with all the people killed in that kind of exchange, we might very well turn to nuclear weapons ourselves and trigger a nuclear war, figuring we had a tremendous advantage over them. And I think that would be a disaster. I'm not saying.
But in some cases, we've been able to go and check. We've done forensics on the phone that the person was using at the time. And in dozens of cases, we found traces of either an attempted or a successful Pegasus infection.
What we know about NSO Group and what they've said for years is that this is a law enforcement tool. But I think what our investigations really revealed is the extent to which that is just a complete, fantasy narrative.
The implications of this software being used widely are effectively an end to privacy for the people who are targeted by it. That has very, very serious ramifications for how people who have legitimate secrets, which is everyone, go about living their lives. The most serious implications of something like Pegasus is that it makes it much more unlikely that a dictatorial regime will become a democracy. Because those were already regimes and systems that were obsessive about trying to monitor their populations so that they could control them and prevent them from, rising up and overthrowing them. And this technology exponentially increases your capacity to do that.
Big brothers.
I do believe it poses a greater threat to democracy. It's exposing that a lot of these technologies that we think are meant to keep us safer on our phones, and even if we're somewhat aware of it, that they're really not keeping us safe.
So, yeah, that's, granted, this is supposedly, allegedly, not happening here. Right? Yeah, allegedly not happening here. Only in other countries is this happening, people. Don't think that we're spying on you. Nobody
You
panicked.
know, that's what we have FBI instigators for, to, you know, go out and instigate, you know, these little 1-6, you know, dates with the White House. Yeah.
Well,
No, it's
and
challenging.
you see the names they had: Khashoggi, another Khashoggi, multiple members of governments, right? Multiple members of the press, right? Which, like, that should scare every press member in the country, because, you know, I mean, we're all doing stuff on our phone and our whatever. I mean, you look at right now during the Medicare for All march, everyone was using their phones to record that, right? You know, if people record their phone for police interactions and, you know, protests and natural disasters, right? And they can just look right in on your private conversations and what you're planning and how you're going to do it. And, you know, it's definitely a big, and without warrant, right? Which goes against the biggest parts of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, right?
Yeah.
No search of seizure, and, you know, don't put a soldier in your house if the government tells you. Like, those are the two big ones, because we really didn't like when they did that to us, you know? So I don't know. There's a great video out there by Richard Medhurst who goes a little bit more in depth on this issue and who's involved and how it's connected to other things. Everyone should go watch that video if they get a chance. But Mr. Firestone, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, this is part of a very long trend, a very long trend by tech firms, okay, and governments to remove our privacy from us, to eliminate, yes, to eliminate our privacy. And I don't know, perhaps it's close to the final step.
Yeah.
It is very scary. We have to protect ourselves. Okay, I don't know exactly how we stop the deep state from doing this kind of thing without completely disempowering the deep state. On the other hand, we seem to feel, or many of us seem to feel, a lot of us seem to feel that we can't get along without the deep state to defend us.
Yeah.
So we have to do something about our ways of defending ourselves as a nation, because that defense structure has now been turned against us for a long time. And from my point of view, the blowback was completely predictable.
Well, you look at you know, the file cabinets that Hoover would be able to walk down and gain any source of information from multitude of public leaders, including Martin Luther King and so many others, that he's able to just walk and get sex tapes and whatever. What do you think? They don't even need file cabinets anymore. It's a server somewhere near Langley, right?
They're all tabbed, tagged, and searchable.
Right, and I already work under the assumption that everything I say, do, post, or type on any service that is connected to the internet, I'm under surveillance to some degree, right? I don't assume that I'm safe in almost any regards there, right? That's for face-to-face communication, secure things, right? Like, you know, your phone lines aren't even a line anymore, right? They can't
Your
just
born
put a
identity blind drop.
right. Yeah, and
your
it's
born identity blind drop. You know, you walk into a park, you stick your thumb drive underneath the bench, you stand up, walk away.
right.
And you know, unknown compatriot comes along and picks it up and, takes it home and then plugs it into his computer attached to the internet, completely destroying the entire intent of the
right. You look at airlock devices and my friends in the dev hack community, right? And definitely don't bring your phones near those friends, because they can pull stuff that you don't even know was there. But it's a constant battle between white hat hackers and the deep state at this point, because it's time and time again they can't stand that we are not controlled by them, right? So I mean, I don't know what this has. Major ramifications that I don't think will be over with, especially when those particular heads of state learn what's been taken from them, right? So and this is apparently, I looked, and the NSO group essentially put out a statement that said, don't blame us, blame the governments who use us. And like, that's a don't hate the player, hate the game statement if I've ever seen. Like, it's not our fault. No, it kind of is, so I don't know. I mean, this is our last story for the night, and I know it's a big deal among other big deals that we're constantly being surveilled and whatever, but
here's some things to put it into perspective for you, Reef. Okay. NSA went and put an installation in Utah, and this is like a petazettabyte, level,
right.
The amount of data it collects
can store
on a daily basis on US, worldly, global connections, all of this data that gets dumped into this facility that's sitting in a desert in the middle of Utah, that's super cooled and has so many tons of storage. They're collecting so much data that literally they have to cycle off every 6 months.
Right.
Anything that is not specifically tagged for retention gets cycled off every 6 months. You need to worry more about organizations like Peterson and McGraw-Hill. Why are Peterson and McGraw-Hill such a big deal? Reason why is because they have access to all of your online student data that you use through K through 12, because schools are using this data, are using these services, and Peterson and McGraw-Hill are collecting the data. Universities are using Peterson and McGraw-Hill for online courses, and they're collecting the data. So literally, your academic record from K through 24 is available to these institutions.
Yep.
In addition to that, they now have access to your genome through genealogy.com and ancestry.com, where you take your little cheek swab. So now they can tie your academic capability, your sports capability, your physical wellness, and they can tie it all to your genetic lines based off of a database somewhere.
So
all of this information.
Are you trying to make us feel better?
Yes. I mean, what do you think my 2%?
Actually, or worse, depending on how you want to feel about it.
What do you think my 2% Eastern European Jew means to the government? Because I don't know what that gets me. Like an extra bagel when I go, like what? You know what I mean?
It doesn't, but it represents a genetic profile that's associated with your evaluated IQ level and your ability to perform through the hoops that you have to jump through the various academic performances in order to achieve your.
I'm 2% better at comedy. Pretty much.
Yes. Your ability to be humorous.
Yes.
So literally, they can now go in and say this gene type is now the model for this particular capability. So if you want a designer child, Reef.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And where do I get the robot arms to put on them afterwards too? Because you take good genetics and then you add technology to that. As long as the government doesn't have the switch for my robot legs, we should be fine. We should be perfectly okay as long as we don't do that. And Elon Musk wants to put chips in your brain. So I don't trust the guy who made a giant phallic rocket to put the chip. What shape is the chip? this should be asked, because I think it needs to be, you know, a little bit more compact and less, you know, Freudian, you know. So
the thing is you're looking at Pegasus right now. What Pegasus is being used to do is blackmail, you know, industry leaders, community leaders. It's actually being used more for industrial espionage.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, than actual politics in the world right now. You know, Israel's using it to infiltrate US industry, Chinese industry, you know, all of these different industries, and pull out and siphon off the secrets. You know, right now, Israel, because of this Pegasus project, NSO has more access to all of the trade secrets of the world.
Yep.
Than any industry in the world right now. You know, so industrial espionage is the key.
So they're the superpower.
Yeah, I mean, literally,
the cyber superpower.
yeah, NSO is a non-state actor superpower with access to every trade secret in the world right now, as well as access to adequate blackmail material for anybody who's had an illicit affair in order to get, you know, favored rulings in a given country in order to continue to operate in whatever capacity they're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
So it
now,
also has access to all the political secrets too, right?
all the political secrets. It has access to, you know, everything that was turned over to Assange.
I see. So maybe that's what's happened to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez then, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she's been caving on issue after issue because
Because ultimately, NSO,
Dude, they have her
NSO
cupcake recipe.
That can be politically damaging to her, so they coach her on what she can't, what she still needs to say, but what she needs to waffle on in Congress.
Yep.
You know, and that's literally everybody. I think honestly, everyone who achieves that rank of being a you know, electoral, you know, politician has that database, has that secret where, you know, NSO or some other organization can literally come out and say, if you don't do what we did, what you want us to do, you know, this is going to come out and it's not going to look good.
Well,
you know,
I think it's about time for us to wrap this thing up. It's been great talking to both of you. The Joe Squared show is fantastic. So, closing statements, boys. Plug whatever you want to. I know, Joe, your in-depth show on your own channel. What's the links for that?
Yeah. Okay, I think the links to that. Okay, YouTube is just YouTube/Joseph Firestone. In other words, you search for Joseph Firestone.
Right.
Okay, you can get to my channel. And then at Facebook, I'm at Let's Get It Done is my Facebook page.
Okay.
So if you search for Let's Get It Done, that's going to be me, my personal Facebook.
Joe Evans over there at ID Joe for Congress on Twitter.
Yeah,
look out
Joe
for him.
For Congress, IdahoJoeForCongress.org is my webpage. I'm currently running. I've actually filed with the FEC, so now I am a legitimate electoral college candidate. Yeah, here in the United States, you know, so is already collecting dirt on me.
Oh,
Yay,
absolutely. Look, my NSA handler Larry likes me. He thinks I'm real funny. Right? As long as I can keep Larry happy, we should be good. Right? He'll vouch for all of us.
There we go. Thank you, Larry, for vouching for us. You know, I enjoy being on lists for many, many reasons. But yeah, thank you. And remember, folks, family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, make anything happen.
Like KRTD, hit that subscribe button. Go find us on our socials at KRTD Media. I think that's KRTD out for tonight. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. It was an experience. Looking forward to the next opportunity.
Yes, sir. Everyone have a good night. Peace, love, and soul.
Yeah,
Peace.
All right, music's on.